إن الحمد لله نحمده ونصلي على رسول الكريم أما بعد قال الله تعالى في القرآن الكريم بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إن الله لا يغير ما بقوم حتى يغيروا ما بأنفسهم صدق الله العظيم. Respected elders, brothers and sisters in Islam, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. The night of Ashura brings to mind two events that are said to have happened on this night. The first from before the coming of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and that of Musa alayhi salam and Pharaoh, and the second from after the passing of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and that is the martyrdom of Hazrat Hussein radiallahu anhu. I'm sure we are all familiar with the story of Musa alayhi salam and Pharaoh, as it is mentioned many times in the Quran. I just give a brief summary of the story. Musa alayhi salam was sent to Pharaoh and his people to call them to Allah and to set the Bani Israel free. But Pharaoh continued to disbelieve. Sign after sign was shown to him and his people, but they rejected them. Pharaoh was an oppressor, a tyrant. He was possibly the most unjust ruler of all time. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala drowned him and preserved his body to be a sign for all times. Pharaoh was so arrogant that he even called himself the Lord Most High. Considering himself all-powerful, he and his army chased after Musa alayhi salam and the Bani Israel as they were crossing the sea to freedom. Pharaoh and his army were drowned, proving once again, as told to us in the Quran, that truth will prevail over falsehood. Now let's take a brief look at the incident at Karbala. Yazid bin Muawiyah claimed to be the Khalif after his father had passed away. He was not appointed as the Khalif through Ashura like the previous Khalifs. Hussein radiallahu anh refused to pledge allegiance to him. Hussein radiallahu anh was invited to Kufa, which was the capital during the Khalifate of Ali radiallahu anh, by people who claimed to be his supporters and told that they would pledge allegiance to him to be their Khalif. However, while on his way to Kufa, the people of Kufa did an about turn in support of Hussein when they were threatened and bribed by Yazid's forces, resulting in the killing of the cousin of Hussein radiallahu anh in Kufa, who was sent to verify the support for Hussein. Hussein continued on to Kufa after hearing of the latest news due to the demand of qisas for his cousin. The Battle of Karbala took place, resulting in the martyrdom of Hussein radiallahu anh. Hussein stood for faith and principle in the face of tyranny and coercion. Looking at these two incidents, we notice a common feature, and that is standing up against the wrong. What I would like to do is bring us closer to home, to here in South Africa. Not too long ago, we were also under oppressive and tyrannical rule with the apartheid regime. It doesn't take much for one to notice the similarities between Pharaoh and his treatment of the Bani Israel and the apartheid regime. One of the many things that it took for apartheid to fall was the many protests that took place. These protests showed that people took a stand against the wrongs they were dealt with. One such event that stands out is the June 16 uprising in Soweto in 1976. The forcing of the language of Afrikaans as a medium of instruction in schools resulted in a protest by black students. It is said that the protest was peaceful until the protesters came across armed policemen who fired tear gas and live ammunition at the protesters. This then led to the uprising, which eventually played a part in the dismantling of the apartheid regime. A second event from our country's history is the Women's March on 9th August 1956 against the pass laws. African women were not allowed to live in towns unless they had permission to work there. And the pass laws would make it even more difficult for them and their children to be with their husbands. Even though their petition was not received by the Prime Minister, the protest sent a message that they would not be intimidated and silenced by unjust laws. The Women's March didn't put an end to apartheid, nor did the student uprising 20 years later, but both events contributed to apartheid's eventual demise. These protests, much like the actions of Musa alayhi salam and Hussein radiallahu anh, are examples for us to be able to understand the advice that we find Luqman alayhi salam giving to his son in Surah Luqman, Surah number 31, verse 17, which reads as follows. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. O my son, establish regular prayer, enjoin what is just and forbid what is wrong, and bear with patient constancy whatever may befall you, for this is firmness of purpose in the conduct of affairs. In standing up for justice and freedom and trying to stop oppressive regimes, they enjoined what is right and forbade what is wrong. Perseverance in your cause is vital, as many times it takes years to put a stop to oppressive rulers. Patience is also necessary in dealing with your own people, as disagreements can happen, as is seen with the people of Musa, continuous disobedience and insincerity. Protests and demonstrations occur all the time throughout the world for various causes. Just a few years back, at the end of 2010, the beginning of 2011, there was a wave of protests in the Middle East and North African regions, which has become known as the Arab Spring. These protests were the result of, among other reasons, poverty, rising food prices, inflation, human rights violation, and high unemployment, as well as political relations like the Egypt government had with Israel and the US. The protests resulted in the rulers of some of these areas being thrown out of power. I was quite surprised to find that while these protests were happening, there were fatwas being passed that protesting and demonstrating are haram. I mentioned some of the reasons that were given making the protests haram. One sheikh said, no doubt the demonstration is from the ways of rebellion. Rather, it is from the rebellion, no doubt. Rebelling against the Muslim leader is haram, whether he is good or bad. Another said, jihad is a righteous action, the pinnacle of Islam. The meaning of jihad is not hollow slogans and demonstrations and declarations. No, jihad is the path of Allah, and the path of Allah is private. Go if there is jihad, fight and you are quiet. No one knows that except Allah. And another sheikh, I do not know anything that proves that these demonstrations are legislated. We do not know the basis in the religion that proves these demonstrations and protests matters. Rather, these matters are newly invented demonstrations are innovation that the people invented and that they have imported from their enemies in the Western and Eastern countries, imitating the kuffar, which is haram, meaning it does not have a basis in the religion. We do not know anything that proves its permissibility in the legislation. The opinions of these sheikhs are startling. It is quite clear from the Quran that when there is an oppressive leader, then it is necessary to stand up against the leadership. As we see in Surah Nisa, verse 75, which reads, A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. And why should you not fight in the cause of Allah and those who, being weak, are ill-treated and oppressed? Men, women, and children whose cry is, Our Lord, rescue us from this town whose people are oppressors, and raise for us from you one who will protect, and raise for us from you one who will help. What is remarkable about protests is that it shows the willingness of the people in wanting change. They want the change themselves and not just wait passively for it to happen. This is an important aspect in the way that the laws of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala work. In Surah Ra'd, verse 11, we read, A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Verily, never will Allah change the condition of a people unless they change it themselves with their own souls. Coming back to South Africa and to present day, protests happen quite often, usually about poor service delivery of housing, electricity, water and sanitation, as well as laws that are considered undemocratic, such as the Information Bill and e-tolls. Most recently, the fees must fall protests have grabbed news headlines. Students are again protesting, this time to make tertiary education affordable. if not free, so that it can be accessible to all. This is a just cause. However, many times we notice that the protesters go too far and start looting, damaging property, and even getting violent. These acts cannot be condoned and hinder the progress of the cause, as it infringes the rights of others. Looting, damaging property, and violence are intentional acts of infringement of others' rights. So serious is this crime that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala prevented the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam from even unintentionally doing this, as we read in Surah Fath, verse 25. A'udhu billahi minash shaitani rajim. They are the ones who denied revelation and hindered you from the sacred mosque, and the sacrificial animals detained from reaching the place of sacrifice. Had there not been believing men and believing women whom you did not know, that you were trampling down, and on whose account a crime would have accrued to you, He may, without your knowledge, Allah would have allowed you to force your way, but He held back your hands, that He may admit to His mercy whom He will. If there had been a part, we should certainly have punished the unbelievers among them with the previous punishment. This verse shows that in wanting some injustice to be set right, other injustices should not be committed. Musa alayhi salam did not fight Pharaoh to become king. Neither did Imam Hussein take on the army of Yazid merely to become Khalif. The effort was in fulfillment of moral obligation, which served as a universal message, which has left a lasting legacy of struggle and resistance against corruption and injustice. The lesson is not in that they were prepared to fight for what is right, but were also willing to die for it. Selflessness, not selfishness. Humility, not ego. Principle, not power. Fighting in Allah's cause and standing up for justice and against oppressors are important for all Muslims. It is something that is very difficult to do, to give up our time, our wealth, and our lives for a cause, and we might not even see victory in this world. We have the two examples of varying fortunes from the night of Ashura. The first of the victory of Musa alayhi salam, and after being trapped and having his followers doubt him, they escaped from Pharaoh with the help of Allah, and his enemy perished. The second is the martyrdom of Hussein radiallahu anhu, after standing up for the establishment of justice, losing his life in the way of Allah. The commemoration of Ashura on the 10th of Muharram every year serves to remind us of the sacrifices of the righteous throughout our glorious history. It reconnects us with our spiritual and moral legacy, making us aware of the people then and now who bravely stood up for what was right. The message is to reform ourselves and our communities. True progress and reform requires not only desire and hope, but commitment and sacrifice. Shukran. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.